Anarchy as solipsism. Anarchy as solipsism has the same problems. Anarchy has the same problems as the solipsistic argument. In both cases, they run into the language and the system of language. In the solipsist case, the idea of other minds is found when the individual, thinking they are the center and the only source of the universe, bumps into what it is they don't know, and they find that what they don't know is found within what other individuals do know. And the anarchist argument, anarchy meaning no rule, bumps into the language, finding that the nounus verbus operation of language, the static and the moving operation of language, is, and the additives, like adjectives and adverbs and such, as ascriptions to the noun or the verb operation in language, is something that they're capable of doing, but they're also finding that the means of this representation follow a particular rule structure. The means of the anarchist following a particular rule structure is anti-sympathetic against the symbol or the Platonic naming of the word anarchy itself. Anarchy as a means of no rule then finds itself as a political argument, which is very similar to the solipsistic argument for the self. In both cases, the solipsist finds that the language violates the solipsism, and that they discover what they didn't know emerged from a mind other than their own. In much the same case that anarchy bumps into the rules of language in the very irony of trying to describe itself. The description itself follows a rule. And so this is problematic, and the response of the anarchist is to become a political thema, to create a political thema, and this is found with the attribution of a suffix to anarchy. So you have anarcho-X, anarcho-compatibilism, anarcho-libertarianism, anarcho-cryptologization, anarcho-capitalism, anarcho, etc. This adding of a suffix is the exception of the anarchist. The anarchist at this point finds and justifies the rules of language as being natural, or what they'll say is naturally emergent. This is to be discluded in the argument of anarchists. The exception to this is the suffix of primitivism. Primitivism as a suffix is pointing back to the Platonic ideal or idea of anarchy meaning no rule. The problem with this anarcho-primitivism is found that it doesn't allow for what anarcho-capitalism allows for, which is freedom from rule and freedom from, but allowing sovereignty and exchange. The very act of exchange itself is a new rule, so what I'll do is I'll add a prefix, which is anti-sympathetic to the suffix of anarcho-primitivism. I'll call it feral anarchy. Anarchy where the speakers do not speak language, therefore they are not engaged in the rule of language, which predominates. The problem with anarcho-X's, or anarcho-suffix individuals, is that they require a certain type of agreement. And some people will argue that this particular agreement is an exchange of what is one's subject. And so if I express something that I say my source, the source of this expression is my subject, and the source of your expression is the same subject, we can say that this is an intersubjective agreement, or in this particular case, a consensus. Consensus also refers to a harmony of agreement. So if we then function outside of the ideal of anarchy, and we realize we are within the descriptive aspects or systemic aspects of language describing anarchy, the anarchist X can then describe and say that the suffix or that the individuals who are moving similarly to one another, they can use descriptive language to say that they are in consensus. So there's consensus upon empirical, the verbal phrase, which are checked and balanced within the rules of language, and then there's said to be consensus in terms of harmony. The other case is this notion of not just consensus as agreement or in moving in harmony, but that some anarchists will argue that there is a singular and universal or applicable to all humans, which seems to go against the very notion of anarchy itself, a behavior or a function which might be said to be the ability to formulate nounus verbus relationships with adjectives, or additives attributed to the nounus verbus operation of language, and that this particular recognition of functionality could be considered natural, and that within that we can say that this nounus verbus operation can describe something that is universal amongst us, and that there's particular universality, and the maintenance of this particular universality is preferable. The problems with this, both a notion of intersubjective consensus as a verbal agreement, as well as this notion of a uniform, universal behavior or functionality of humans as preferable and preferable for all to maintain, functions in sympathy with what the anarchists are opposed to. Anarchists go against religion and the state, and yet the notion of consensus stemming from the self that is agreed upon, or the notion that we all agree upon a common thema that is preferable, is similar to religion. Religious ideologies come from authorities. Authority has the same root as the word inflation. If an individual becomes popular or influential, then this individual will either start attracting individuals, people will start following their lead, following their rule. There will be a certain gravitation towards them and a certain power that is given to this individual. One could call it a pharaonic power or a presidential power. One might just call them an authority. And they then ascribe themselves to this inflation around this individual. So very similar to the consensus or the preferable behavior, which is to be about an individual, anarchists who have already stepped away from the very root of anarchy in order to add the suffix in order to explain this, are now functioning like a religion, which they themselves by thema, via thema, are against religion. The religion then is also claimed to be a prelude to the state. The state then would function as the individuals who are upholding the authority in a parasitic host relationship to the pharaonic or presidential power that exists, to whomever is holding this gravitational pull. And then they themselves raise their children in it and influence others to gravitate towards this authority. So anarchists are ironically functioning as religious inflations, trying to get agreement upon a rule. Or I shouldn't say anarchists, I should say anarcho-exists, anarcho-suffixists are doing this. And anyway, so that's my first base argument as to why anarchy is just a play in words. It is a solipsistic argument that is manifest into a supposedly pragmatic approach towards politics. Thanks.